In the summer of 1939, when the world was bracing for war, the Lockheed Corporation in California was working on a machine unlike anything that had ever flown before. It had two engines instead of one, twin booms instead of a single fuselage, and a cockpit placed like a bullet between two long silver spears. Its name was the P-38 Lightning. To engineers, it was a daring leap in design, a response to a U.S. Army request for an interceptor fast enough to catch enemy bombers at 25,000 feet. To everyone else, it looked like a futuristic experiment that shouldn't even be able to lift off. Yet on January 27, 1939, the prototype, coded XP-38, roared across Muroc Dry Lake. It climbed with a sound never heard before, two Allison V-1710 engines screaming in perfect synchronization. The test pilots who saw it that day said it looked more like a comet than a plane. By the time America entered World War II, the P-38 was already one of the fastest fighters on Earth, capable of reaching over 400 miles per hour and flying farther than any other single-seat aircraft in service. Its turbo superchargers allowed it to keep power at high altitude, where oxygen was thin and most engines gasped for life. For the first time, US pilots could chase the enemy not just across the front line, but across entire seas. When the Lightning arrived in Europe and the Pacific, both allies and enemies took notice. German pilots nicknamed it Der Gabelschwanzteufel, the fork-tailed devil. Japanese troops who spotted it high above the Solomon Islands called it simply two-tailed death. To the men who flew against it, the silhouette of twin tails glinting in the sun meant danger. But the story had another side, one that few outside the cockpit understood. For all its brilliance, the P-38 was a beast that demanded respect. It was fast, heavily armed, and unforgiving. New pilots assigned to Lightning squadrons quickly learned that this was no ordinary fighter. Its systems were complex: two engines, two fuel lines, twin propellers rotating in opposite directions, and a web of hydraulics running through its frame. Mistakes could be fatal. Training films at the time warned pilots to memorize every checklist before takeoff. If they lost one engine on climb out and reacted the wrong way, the asymmetric thrust could spin the airplane out of control in seconds. Even experienced aviators admitted that the Lightning could bite. The danger didn't end there. As speeds increased beyond 500 miles per hour, the P-38 began to encounter a mysterious phenomenon scientists barely understood: compressibility. When the aircraft dove too fast, the airflow around its wings neared the speed of sound. The controls would stiffen, the nose would tuck under, and the pilot's strength alone could not pull the stick back. Several test pilots were lost before engineers realized what was happening. Still, Lockheed persisted. Under the leadership of a young genius named Clarence Kelly Johnson, the company began recording data from every flight, every mishap, every rumor whispered on the airfields of California and England. Johnson believed that progress came from understanding fear, not avoiding it. As the war intensified, the Lightning entered combat from Alaska to North Africa. It shot down enemy bombers, escorted heavy B-17s, and performed reconnaissance over dangerous territory. In the Pacific, where long distances punished single-engine fighters, the P-38's twin Allisons became its greatest strength. It could fly hundreds of miles, attack, and come home on a single engine if the other failed. But to the men inside the narrow cockpit, victory often came with unease. Many described hearing a strange vibration at high speed, or feeling the control yoke resist their touch as if the plane itself were testing their courage. The nickname "fork-tailed devil" began to sound less like an enemy insult and more like a private confession. They loved the airplane, but they also feared it. One veteran later recalled, "You didn't just fly the Lightning. You entered into an agreement with it. You promised to treat it right, and maybe, just maybe, it would bring you home." And that uneasy relationship produced some of the most daring missions of the war. In 1943, P-38s flying from Guadalcanal intercepted the transport plane carrying Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor. The mission required a 4-hour flight over open ocean at treetop level, guided only by dead reckoning. The Lightnings arrived exactly on time and completed one of the most precise interceptions in aviation history. It was a demonstration of American planning, technology, and nerve, and it cemented the P-38's reputation as a weapon unlike any other. By the end of 1943, the aircraft's flaws were being tamed. Engineers introduced dive recovery flaps that reduced the effects of compressibility. New heating systems eased the freezing conditions that had plagued pilots at altitude. Bit by bit, the Lightning evolved from a dangerous prototype into a refined instrument of air power. Yet even with improvements, the aura of danger remained. Pilots respected the Lightning as a living thing, a partner that demanded discipline and courage. It was the first true high-speed twin-engine fighter of its kind, and mastering it became a symbol of American innovation and pilot skill. In every theater where it flew, the twin-tailed silhouette of the P-38 came to represent something larger than technology. It was the image of a nation learning, adapting, and pushing beyond its limits, one flight at a time. And for those who strapped themselves into its metal frame, that lesson came with every heartbeat. Power without respect could kill, but courage guided by knowledge could change the course of a war. By early 1943, the P-38 Lightning had proven itself in the skies over North Africa and the Pacific. Yet beneath its shining aluminum skin lay a mystery that frightened even the most skilled aviators. The faster it flew, the more it wanted to kill its own pilot. In an era when engineers were still learning the boundaries of flight, the P-38 was pushing through uncharted air. Powered by 2 turbo-supercharged engines, it could dive faster than any aircraft of its generation. But speed brought with it an invisible enemy: the laws of physics themselves. Pilots began reporting the same terrifying phenomenon. During a high-speed dive, the airplane's nose would suddenly pitch downward, and the control stick would freeze solid. No matter how hard they pulled, nothing happened. It was as if the Lightning had decided to finish the flight on its own terms. Some managed to recover by sheer luck, pulling out just above the tree line. Others were not so fortunate. The wreckage that followed left engineers puzzled and commanders uneasy. These weren't inexperienced recruits. They were seasoned airmen, men who had survived dogfights and flak, only to lose their lives to a mechanical ghost. The problem was compressibility, a new and poorly understood aerodynamic effect. As the Lightning approached the speed of sound, the air flowing over its wings and control surfaces began to compress. Pressure built unevenly across the airplane, causing the tailplane to lose lift. The nose dropped, and the pilot's controls locked tight. No one had predicted it. Before the war, flight testing rarely exceeded 400 miles per hour. Now, with the P-38 diving past 500, humanity had entered a new regime of aerodynamics, one where air behaved less like a gentle fluid and more like a solid wall. At Lockheed's headquarters in Burbank, California, a small group of engineers worked day and night to understand what was happening. Leading them was Clarence Kelly Johnson, a 33-year-old designer with a reputation for solving the impossible. Johnson knew that if they couldn't fix the Lightning's high-speed behavior, the Air Force might ground it altogether. The team gathered every report from the front lines: pilot debriefs, crash analyses, instrument readings from test flights. What they saw was consistent. Above a certain speed and altitude, the airflow over the wings reached Mach 0, 68, dangerously close to the speed of sound. Shock waves formed along the wings, altering pressure in unpredictable ways. It wasn't just a Lockheed problem, it was a frontier problem. No one had ever built a plane that flew this fast for this long. The Lightning had unknowingly become the world's first laboratory for transonic flight. To study the phenomenon, Lockheed's test pilots risked their lives again and again. Among them was Ralph Verdun, a veteran flyer who volunteered to take the Lightning to its limits. In November 1941, during a controlled test dive, his P-38 entered compressibility and failed to recover. Verdun was killed instantly. The loss devastated the team, but Johnson refused to give up. He studied wind tunnel data, interviewed surviving pilots, and eventually proposed a solution: dive recovery flaps, small panels installed under the wings that, when deployed, would restore lift to the tail and allow the pilot to pull out safely. It was a bold idea, one that had never been attempted on a fighter aircraft. When the first modified P-38s took to the air in 1944, the difference was immediate. The Lightning could now dive at over 500 miles per hour, then recover smoothly at the pull of the stick. But the cost of reaching that point had been high. Many pilots had paid with their lives before the fix arrived. In squadron diaries, men wrote about the eerie quiet that followed a failed dive, the absence of radio calls, the long seconds before someone whispered, "He's gone." Even after the improvement, the P-38's reputation remained mixed. It was admired for its speed and range, feared for its unpredictability, and respected for its sheer power. One combat report from Europe summed it up perfectly. The P-38 is the best friend and the worst enemy a pilot can have. Treat it right, and it will take you home. Forget what it can do, and it will remind you. As word spread of the new dive flaps, confidence slowly returned. The Lightning's performance in the Pacific soared. Pilots like Major Richard Bong and Thomas McGuire became household names, their P-38s scoring dozens of aerial victories against Japanese fighters. Their success proved that the aircraft's dangers could be mastered, and that the problem had never been the machine alone, but the limits of human understanding. The lessons learned from the P-38 would shape the entire future of aviation. Engineers discovered that airflow could turn lethal near the speed of sound, and began designing wings and fuselages to handle those forces. Within a few years, that knowledge would lead to the creation of the world's first supersonic jets. Back in the war, however, those lessons were written not in textbooks, but in the sky, traced by contrails that began high above the clouds and ended in silence. By 1944, the Lightning was no longer the unpredictable beast it had once been. It had matured into a refined weapon, faster, stronger, and safer, but every pilot who strapped in knew what history had cost to make it so. The airplane that had terrified its own men had also taught them how to conquer fear with science. In the end, the P-38's battle against compressibility was more than a technical triumph. It was a victory of courage and intellect over the unknown. The monster of speed had become the teacher of a generation, guiding American aviation toward the supersonic age. By 1943, the P-38 Lightning had become both a symbol of American air power and a test of human endurance. For the men who flew it, courage was not a slogan. It was the only way home. The Lightning's mission stretched across some of the most unforgiving environments on Earth. In the Pacific, pilots flew hundreds of miles over endless ocean, with nothing but compass bearings and faith to guide them back. In Europe, they faced bitter cold, dense cloud, and anti-aircraft fire from below. But perhaps the most dangerous enemy was the machine itself, a twin-engine marvel that demanded perfection from those who dared command it. The burden of complexity. To the young aviators arriving at training fields in California or Florida, the P-38 looked like a spaceship. 2 engines, 2 turbo superchargers, counter-rotating propellers, complex electrical systems, and a network of fuel lines that needed constant attention. A single misset switch could unbalance the aircraft and send it rolling uncontrollably. Instructors warned them, this is not a plane that forgives mistakes. During takeoff, if one of the Allisons lost power, asymmetric thrust could twist the aircraft violently. If the pilot failed to react within seconds, cutting the other engine, adjusting rudder and ailerons, the Lightning could flip before leaving the ground. Countless training accidents were recorded during 1942 and 1943, most attributed not to poor design, but to the aircraft's sensitivity. Veteran pilot Charles Lindbergh, who later flew combat missions as a civilian consultant, described the experience. The Lightning is like a thoroughbred horse. It senses fear, hesitation, and carelessness. You don't ride it, you communicate with it. The cold enemy at 30,000 feet, another danger awaited, the cold. Early Lightnings lacked adequate cabin heating, temperatures dropped below 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Frost formed on the inside of the canopy, oxygen masks froze to faces, hands stiffened on the controls. Pilots improvised, wrapping themselves in wool, stuffing newspapers into their boots, and rubbing the canopy with soap to prevent icing. Yet even with those precautions, frostbite was common. Instruments failed, guns jammed, and visibility vanished. A letter written by Lieutenant Raymond Wetmore, later one of America's top aces, described the ordeal. After 4 hours up there, you stop feeling your feet. You breathe steam, and it freezes inside your mask. When you land, you're more exhausted from fighting the cold than from fighting the enemy. Still, they flew. Because the Lightning could escort bombers farther than any other fighter, its presence meant survival for the crews of B-24s and B-17s heading deep into enemy territory. The sound of isolation. Inside the cockpit, the world was reduced to vibration and noise. The twin Allisons thundered like continuous explosions, rattling every rivet. Communication was limited to scratchy radio signals, often lost in static. Pilots spent long hours alone, a single human presence, suspended in a cage of glass and metal. Psychologists today would call it sensory overload. Back then, it was simply called combat fatigue. Pilots returned from missions trembling, their hands still locked in the shape of the control yoke. Some couldn't sleep for days. The Air Force began rotating crews more frequently, realizing that the Lightning tested not only skill, but also mental resilience. Yet the machine also inspired devotion. The pilots gave their planes names: California Cutie, Wicked Woman, Peg of My Heart, painting them in bright colors that defied the dull gray of war. Those names became personal talismans, reminders that behind the steel and fuel still beat something human. Brothers in fear. In every squadron, there was an unspoken bond, the shared fear of what could go wrong, and the determination to master it. Pilots who survived their first 10 missions were considered veterans. Those who reached 20 became legends. Major Richard Bong, a farm boy from Wisconsin, learned to sense the airplane's moods, the vibration that warned of a fuel imbalance, the faint tremor before a turbocharger surged. He treated the P-38 with near-religious respect and went on to score 40 aerial victories, becoming America's highest-scoring ace. His fellow pilot Thomas McGuire followed closely behind, fearless and analytical, often flying experimental maneuvers to push the Lightning's limits. Together, they proved that understanding the machine's temperament was as vital as courage itself. Their rivalry was friendly but fierce, a reflection of the broader American spirit. Competition driving excellence. Between them, Bong and McGuire accounted for over 70 enemy aircraft, turning the P-38 from a feared beast into a legend. Fear as a teacher. By late 1944, most pilots had learned a quiet truth. Fear wasn't weakness, it was information. The men who respected the Lightning survived. Those who underestimated it did not. Each pre-flight check became a ritual, each takeoff a test of discipline, and each landing a moment of silent gratitude. The aircraft's complexity, once cursed, became a symbol of technological mastery, a reminder that progress often demands risk. The P-38 had taught its pilots more than tactics. It had taught them humility. In the cockpit, surrounded by the roar of two engines and the vastness of the sky, they discovered the thin line between control and chaos, and the power of preparation, faith, and brotherhood. When they returned to base, grease-streaked and shivering, ground crews would gather around as the twin engines cooled, releasing steam into the cold air. Someone would slap the wing and whisper, "She brought him back," the legacy of courage. In war, fear can destroy or define. For the Lightning's pilots, it became a teacher, one that shaped a generation of aviators who would later command the jet age. Behind every mission log, every medal, every photograph of a smiling pilot beside his silver machine, lay a truth rarely spoken. The men who mastered the P-38 did so not because they lacked fear, but because they learned to fly with it. By 1944, the P-38 Lightning had evolved from a risky experiment into one of the most refined fighting machines of World War II. It had taught engineers the limits of speed, humbled pilots with its complexity, and terrified enemies with its power. But now, with new modifications and the lessons of blood and experience, it was about to earn something greater than fear: respect. The transformation began in the hands of Lockheed's relentless engineering team, led by Clarence Kelly Johnson, the same man who had once sketched the Lightning's first design on a restaurant napkin, now oversaw a crash program to make it safer, faster, and deadlier. Johnson's team studied every report coming from Europe and the Pacific. They saw the same issues repeated: cockpit frost, unreliable oxygen regulators, control stiffness at high speed, and communication failures during long-range flights. Each complaint represented lives lost, and each demanded a solution: engineering the impossible. The most dangerous flaw, compressibility, had already been confronted. In 1943, Lockheed introduced dive recovery flaps, small surfaces beneath the wings that changed airflow and allowed pilots to regain control in high-speed dives. It was a simple innovation that transformed the Lightning's reputation. Pilots who had once feared the sound of rushing air now dove with confidence, knowing they could pull out safely. Other upgrades followed. Improved cockpit heating and defrosting systems turned the icy coffin of early models into a survivable workspace. Oxygen supply systems were redesigned. Turbo superchargers received better cooling ducts. Radio equipment became clearer, reducing the isolation that haunted long-range patrols. Johnson also insisted on refining the aircraft's aerodynamics. Minor changes to the tailplane, propeller pitch, and wing root vents improved stability and fuel efficiency. These updates gave birth to the P-38J and P-38L, the definitive versions that would carry the Lightning to victory. By mid-1944, the new Lightnings were rolling off assembly lines at an astonishing rate, one every 30 minutes, their polished aluminum bodies gleaming under the California sun. The U.S. Army Air Forces had found their long-range escort, reconnaissance scout, and ground attack fighter all in one machine. The mission that changed everything. The Lightning's legend was sealed with one of the most audacious missions of the war: Operation Vengeance. On April 18, 1943, intelligence decrypted Japanese communications, revealing that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of the attack on Pearl Harbor, would be flying to Bougainville Island. The United States planned to intercept his transport plane in mid-air, a feat that seemed impossible. No other fighter had the range to reach the target, engage, and return, except one. 18 P-38s from the 339th Fighter Squadron took off from Guadalcanal before dawn, each loaded with extra fuel tanks. Flying at treetop level for over 400 miles to avoid radar, they arrived precisely on schedule. At 9:34 a.m., they spotted two Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers escorted by 6 Zero fighters. In a brief but decisive dogfight, the lightning struck. Yamamoto's aircraft spiraled into the jungle below. Every pilot returned alive. The mission demonstrated the P-38's unmatched reach, precision, and reliability. It wasn't just a victory of arms, it was a statement of technological dominance and intelligence coordination. The United States had proven it could strike anywhere, at any time. The lightning over Europe. While the Pacific celebrated its heroes, across the Atlantic, the lightning was carving its own legacy. In the skies over Italy, France, and Germany, the P-38 escorted bombers deep into enemy territory before the arrival of the P-51 Mustang. Its dual engines offered security over long stretches of water and mountains. If one failed, the other could still bring the pilot home. Pilots from the 1st, 14th, and 82nd Fighter Groups flew hundreds of missions from North Africa to the heart of Europe. The aircraft excelled in photographic reconnaissance, capturing high-resolution images of enemy defenses from altitudes unreachable by most fighters. Reconnaissance P-38s, stripped of guns and painted in dull gray, became the eyes of the Allied advance. The photographs they brought back guided bombers, naval fleets, and even the D-Day invasion planners. Historians later credited the Lightning with providing the most accurate pre-invasion intelligence of the war, masters of the sky. In combat, the aircraft became a legend among legends. Major Richard Bong and Major Thomas McGuire, flying P-38s in the Pacific, rose to the top of America's ace list. 40 and 38 confirmed victories, respectively. Both men described the Lightning as a thinking airplane. It demanded attention, rewarded precision, and punished carelessness. Bong's wingman once said, "He flew it like a violin, delicate, exact, and deadly." The P-38's combination of speed, climb rate, and heavy armament, one 20mm cannon and 4 50-caliber machine guns in the nose, made it a fearsome dogfighter. Unlike other aircraft whose guns were mounted in the wings, the Lightning's concentrated fire converged perfectly at any range. Pilots called it the world's most accurate shotgun. The glory years. By the final year of the war, the Lightning had become a workhorse across every front. It bombed rail lines in Italy, strafed convoys in Burma, escorted B-29s over the Philippines, and hunted enemy fighters above Berlin. It was no longer the unpredictable prototype that killed its own pilots. It was now the guardian of thousands. Mechanics admired it for its toughness, its ability to limp home riddled with holes, one propeller feathered, hydraulic fluid leaking, yet still landing safely. Pilots trusted it like a loyal partner. And for Lockheed, it was proof that American engineering could solve the unsolvable. Each modification, each crash report, and each lesson learned had transformed the Lightning from a dangerous curiosity into a masterpiece of controlled power. When the war ended, more than 10,000 P-38s had been built. They had flown in every major theater, served every role imaginable, and paved the way for the jet-age designs that would follow. As the last Lightnings returned home, they carried the legacy of a nation that refused to stop improving. A nation that turned fear into understanding and understanding into victory. The fork-tailed devil had been tamed. And in doing so, it became something more than a weapon. It became a symbol of what human ingenuity could achieve when courage met determination in the open sky. When World War II ended in 1945, the skies above Europe and the Pacific fell silent. The thunder of engines faded, the contrails disappeared, and men who had lived half their lives in flight returned home to a quieter world. But one sound, the unmistakable twin hum of the P-38 Lightning, continued to echo in history. For thousands of pilots, mechanics, and engineers, the Lightning represented the summit of wartime innovation. It was the plane that bridged two eras, the age of propellers and the dawn of jets. And though its production ended in 1945, its influence reached far beyond the war. It was built to fight. The final missions. In the closing months of the conflict, Lightnings carried out their last great operations with precision and reliability. Over the Philippines and Okinawa, they escorted B-29 superfortresses, intercepted kamikaze raids, and attacked enemy shipping with deadly accuracy. In Europe, reconnaissance variants known as F-5 Lightnings continued to map the continent from above, photographing bomb damage and troop movements even after the surrender. When victory was declared, many P-38s stood abandoned on foreign airfields, their silver skins dulled by months of rain and salt. Some were scrapped, melted down into peacetime metal. Others were left to rust in jungle hangars or European barns. But for those who had flown them, they were never just machines. They were companions that had carried them through the most dangerous skies on Earth. Lieutenant Robin Olds, who later became one of America's greatest jet aces, flew P-38s in Europe before transitioning to the P-51 and later the F-4 Phantom. Decades later, he still spoke of the Lightning with reverence. It had personality. It talked to you through the controls. When you learned its language, it would do anything you asked, and sometimes more. A bridge to the future. As the war ended, Kelly Johnson and his Lockheed team turned their attention to the next frontier, the jet age. The lessons learned from the Lightning's aerodynamic challenges directly shaped Johnson's next project, the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, America's first operational jet fighter. The P-38's high-speed research into compressibility, airframe stress, and control surfaces laid the foundation for understanding transonic flight, the region between subsonic and supersonic speeds that no aircraft had safely crossed before. Wind tunnel tests from the Lightning's program were later studied by NACA, the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics, predecessor to NASA, to help design the Bell X-1, the rocket plane that broke the sound barrier in 1947 with Chuck Yeager at the controls. In that sense, the Lightning did not merely fight a war, it accelerated the science of flight itself. It taught engineers that speed could twist metal, that air could turn solid, and that progress often demanded the courage to learn from catastrophe. A symbol of American ingenuity, the P-38's design was an American contradiction, elegant yet aggressive, complex yet practical. It embodied the spirit of a country that approached war not just with numbers, but with ideas. Its production was a triumph of industrial coordination, over 10,000 aircraft built across multiple factories, each tailored to specific theaters, long-range J and L models for the Pacific, high-altitude reconnaissance versions for Europe, and specialized night fighters equipped with radar. Beyond technology, the Lightning carried a symbolic weight. Its twin booms became a visual icon of American power, instantly recognizable on propaganda posters, postage stamps, and newsreels. To millions, it represented the combination of science and courage that defined the Allied victory, the end of an era. By 1946, jet propulsion had rendered piston engine fighters obsolete. The P-80, F-84, and F-86 were now the future. Yet the US Air Force kept several squadrons of P-38s active through the late 1940s, mainly as reconnaissance aircraft during the early Cold War. Their long range and stability made them ideal for photo-mapping remote territories, from Alaska to the Mediterranean. Some were transferred to allied nations, France, Italy, and Honduras among them, where they flew for years in secondary roles. A handful even served in civilian life, converted for aerial surveying, firefighting, or air racing. But for most, their service ended quietly, far from the glory of the skies they once ruled. Remembering the fork-tailed devil. In the decades that followed, aviation enthusiasts and veterans began restoring surviving Lightnings. Museums across the United States From the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Ohio to the Plains of Fame Museum in California, now preserve gleaming examples of the aircraft, their polished aluminum reflecting the faces of new generations who never knew war but still feel its echoes. At air shows, when a restored P-38 takes to the air, the crowd falls silent. Its engines, those deep, synchronized Allisons, produce a sound unlike any other. Old pilots often close their eyes. For them, it is not just noise, it is memory. The human legacy. More than its mechanical achievements, the P-38's true legacy lies in the people it shaped. The pilots who tamed its power became leaders of post-war aviation. The engineers who solved its mysteries laid the groundwork for supersonic research. And the lessons learned in its cockpit about courage, teamwork, and respect for technology carried into every generation of American aerospace that followed. In many ways, the Lightning reflected the country that built it, bold, flawed, determined to improve. It began as an untested design that killed test pilots and ended as one of the most versatile fighters of the war. It taught humility to those who flew it and left behind a blueprint for progress, forged through trial and error. A thunder that never fades today. Fewer than a dozen P-38s remain airworthy. Yet their flights draw thousands, not for nostalgia alone, but for what they represent. The moment when human intellect met mechanical ambition and refused to yield. Each time its twin booms shimmer in sunlight, each time its engines rise in unison, the Lightning speaks again, a reminder of how far determination can carry a generation and how the pursuit of mastery can shape the destiny of a nation. The war ended, but the spirit of the Lightning did not. It lives on, in museums, in history books, and in every roar of a jet that traces its lineage back to that daring machine, born of courage, forged in fire, and remembered forever as the fork-tailed devil that conquered both fear and the sky.